Welcome to Brain Health Matters, a series of courses, programs, and shows just like this, all designed to help you become healthier so your brain can become happier and stronger. This week, most people believe that there is no coming back from a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, but my guest is here to tell you that is not the case, and she has the cases to prove it. Stay tuned.
Brain Health Matters is brought to you by Don't Let the Memories Fade. Learn many enjoyable ways to enhance body, mind, and spirit with simple lifestyle changes that will help you improve your memory and your mind. You can create a healthier, more vibrant future with Don't Let the Memories Fade. Available in ebook and paperback on Amazon everywhere.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Kate Kunkle, the founder of Brain Health Matters, and I am so jazzed today because I am being joined by Dr. Heather Sandison. She is a naturopathic doctor and the founder of Solseri, an integrative medical practice that specializes in preventing and treating dementia, and a Marama, a senior living facility designed and operated with the goal for residents to return to independent living. I can't wait to talk about this. She specializes in neurocognitive medicine and neurohacking and has been trained to specifically address imbalances that affect the brain, which include autism, ADHD, depression, and of course, Alzheimer's. Welcome and thank you so much for taking the time out of your super busy schedule to chat with me.
Oh, Kate, it's such a pleasure to be here. I interviewed you for my summit and I did over 50 interviews and yours really stood out as one that was highly enjoyable. Your passion and your care for the people that you work with really comes through in just even a 30-minute conversation. And so I wasn't going to miss the opportunity to have another conversation with you.
Thank you so much. So folks, the summit that Dr. Sandison is talking about is the 2022 Reverse Alzheimer Summit. And I am beyond excited to be part of this. But tell us a little bit about what you're hoping to achieve and what people can expect besides me.
So I've partnered this year with Dr. Bredesen, who is the author, New York Times bestselling author of the End of Alzheimer's. And he was really the one who put this protocol on the map. He was one of the first people who put himself out there and said, hey, this is treatable. This is reversible. I was told by so many well-meaning, very well-trained, very intelligent people not to tell someone that there was hope if someone had a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's. And what I've seen is that that's not true. There is hope. I've seen severely demented patients who have gotten improvement. Not all of them go back to work. We certainly have the most confidence when it's early on and when people are younger, when they're noticing brain changes at that beginning stage, that's when we want to intervene. But my goal of the Reverse Alzheimer's Summit is to change the narrative, is that anyone being told by a neurologist that there's nothing they can do for dementia, I want them to know that that's absolutely factually inaccurate. There is so much that they can do for dementia. I'm also partnering with Dr. David Perlmutter. I don't want to leave him out. He's been a phenomenal support. He is the author of Grain Brain, Brain Maker, Brainwashed, all of the brain books. And so both Dr. Perlmutter and Dr. Bredesen have been very supportive of me and my work. And I am joining them in this crusade, essentially, to change the narrative, to change what people understand about dementia and Alzheimer's and show people what's possible.
Thank you so much, Heather. That's so perfect because I've been beating this drum for a very long time as well. There is hope there. We can not only prevent this, we can make big changes even once there is a diagnosis and once progression has gotten a little further than we even expect there could be changes, right? So tell us about Marama.
Yeah, so I started Marama because I had, like I said, I had been told that there was nothing you could do for dementia. To suggest that there was to give people false hope and that would be cruel, right? And I took that at face value. Then I went and trained with Dr. Bredesen. And when I came back from that training, I was on his list of people that had been trained by him, right? So I had patients coming into me asking for help who had more faith in the process than I did. I was still skeptical. And then when I saw absolute miracles happen, people with severe disease getting better, how could I do anything else with my life other then stop unnecessary suffering that was happening, right? Do what I could to stop that. And so I started to gain a reputation clinically around helping people get benefit from reversing dementia and implementing Dr. Bredesen's protocol. And so then I started getting emails from people saying, hey, I heard that you do this. Where can I send my uncle or my dad or my mom? I really want them getting the benefit of this protocol, but it's so challenging to do at home. I can certainly relate to a lot of the women I speak to. They're in this sandwich generation of raising their own kids. They work full time, they're managing their households, and then they've got a parent or a loved one who's elderly who they want, they're well educated and they want that loved one to get the best care possible, but they're like, where do I start? I can't do all the grocery shopping and convince them to eat differently and get them exercising. So is there a place I can send them where there's like right, this isn't rocket science. You take elderly people where they live, there's senior living facilities, and you put the best in what we know about brain health and how to support it, from lifestyle to engagement, all of these things, put them together, right? Put them in the same spot. And so I was like, oh, I'm sure somebody else has thought of this, right? There must be places to refer them to. And as I started looking, I realized that there's nowhere else in the world doing this. And I just thought, that's crazy. Like we have to do this. And how hard could it be? Of course, then we ended up opening our doors March 1st of 2020, and the world shut down with the global pandemic that drastically affected senior living facilities. It's been a wild ride, but we're very fortunate to, understand a lot more about COVID now and be able to mitigate the risk associated with that. And in that, we stayed a little smaller, we stayed a little tighter, we didn't grow as fast, and the relationships were magic, and the miracles we saw were so inspiring. And what we've done is basically what I was describing. We've just put the Bredesen protocol, we've created an immersive experience. So you show up and you don't have to think about it again.
There you go. That's what it takes, because, I coach people to improve their brain health, to avoid problems. But it is a challenge, even for people who are healthy, even for people who are just living their normal middle-aged lives, to incorporate all of these things. So the fact that you've been able to do this in a facility for people who are already exhibiting signs of dementia. So tell us a little bit, because I've spoken about the bits and pieces through this process here at Brain Health Matters, but tell us a little bit about what somebody can expect if they want to reverse this. Like, is it detox? Is it vitamins? What is it?
Yeah. So first I want to say, like, the health coaching that you offer, this is the highest value of any of like the things that you can do. You can go read the Bredesen book, and that's really helpful. And a lot of people get benefit just from reading that and implementing what they can. And then some people go and get a doctor, and some people sign up for this and sign up for that. And there's Marama, right? But Marama isn't ideal. Like, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need Maramas, because everyone would do this at home, where they're still with their loved ones. They're engaged in their communities. They're going to their own church. They're staying actively involved at work, maybe. So having a health coach, I think, is the highest value support that someone can get. And the other thing is, it's way less expensive. It's much, I think that the incentive to do it comes much earlier, right? Most people are incentivized to move to Marama when they're kind of at their wits' end, like when they're very desperate, so their disease has progressed a lot. And if you can get that health coaching in your 40s and 50s and start implementing, and maybe you don't do all of it right at once, but you just start shifting the trajectory, and every month you add a little bit more of this comprehensive protocol, then that's when you really shift, like, where your endpoint is at 105, right? Like, where you end up, where your health is in the last decades of your life. Now, you have a great question, like, what does this look like? What we see is my confidence that this protocol will work goes up when you start early. So when the severity of the changes in the brain are less. And we know that when symptoms show up, there are changes that happen in the brain that have been going on for decades, sometimes 20, 30 years. And so there's the ideal time to intervene is prevention, before you have symptoms. But let's say you have symptoms, the sooner the better. The other thing that we see be really helpful is that people are very comprehensive about how they implement. So if you just do bits and pieces, like if you don't do the diet, but you say you start walking instead of just sitting on the couch, is that going to be beneficial for your health? Yes. But are you going to get reversal of dementia? Maybe, but probably not. My confidence goes down. So the more comprehensive we can be, the earlier on in the disease process, and then the younger you are, the more benefit we tend to see. Now, it doesn't matter your genetics. So we see great results with people with ApoE44 status, so the highest genetic risk. But if they're in their 40s and 50s and already noticing a little bit of subjective cognitive impairment, or even some measurable cognitive impairment, they get comprehensive about how they apply the approach. They get reversal of disease.
Wow, that's
It's
amazing.
It's really impressive. I would say the more comprehensive people are, the more they just dive all the way in, the better the results. And the vast majority of the time, they are getting reversal of disease.
Wow, that's
So,
incredible, because everybody's told, like you said, you can't do anything. Once you've got it, you've got it. Go home and make your plans, prepare for the best quality of life that you can, have your family put all your affairs in order, and just wait.
right. And, unfortunately, there are diseases like ALS, like where that's still kind of the answer as far as I understand. And with what we've seen, especially if there are the bulbar symptoms and stuff. And I don't want to talk too much about other neurodegenerative diseases, but with dementia, there is hope. We see it over and over again. Okay, so what does a comprehensive plan look like? I organize myself in a few different ways. From a medical side, I think of 5 primary causes of neurodegenerative disease, and it's toxins. And so that means detox. And this means creating a healing environment where we're not exposed to a lot of toxins, right? Stopping the toxic exposure. It also means getting them out. And what I like about this detox step is that we can complete it. We can check the box. A lot of the other things, like, they go on forever. But when we understand what toxins we're exposed to, we can eliminate them. Once we start getting the detox flow going, we can get rid of mycotoxins, heavy metals. We can check these boxes and move on. Now, we're all exposed to some toxins. Unfortunately, we live in a toxic world, so we're not going to eliminate 100% of them, but we can get onto a maintenance program after we've checked the box. We can get onto a maintenance program that's very simple and feasible to do. And then the second thing is nutrients. So we want to make sure we're nourished. When we are under extra stress, when we are under the stress of toxicity, maybe psychosocial stress, maybe chronic pain, we require more nutrients. As we age, we require more nutrients. As we age, it's harder to digest and assimilate, absorb our foods. Even if we're choosing good foods, we might need a little extra support from digestive enzymes or some gut healing. And so we need to be able to absorb our nutrients, get the most of them, get enough of them, and maybe even a little extra, so that that doesn't become the bottleneck of healing. And then a ketogenic diet, when it comes to nutrients, the best fuel for the brain is ketones. And so if we've been burning sugar for fuel our entire lives, we want to flip that switch and start burning fat for fuel. Our brains love it. And I've been in ketosis lately. I will tell you, if anyone ever asks you how to get a couple extra hours in the day, the answer is get into ketosis, because you wake up with more energy, you sleep better, everything runs a little more efficiently.
Yes, I agree. I did keto a long time ago, but now I'm basically doing ketosis on a vegan diet, just so that the people who do pay attention, who watch this program, they know it is possible to do keto on a vegan diet, which is, of course, what I espouse. But I know that's not for everybody, but that is an amazing thing. Yes, more energy, more clarity of thought. Yes, 100%.
And what I think some people get confused that I'm suggesting that you be in ketosis for the rest of your life. Not at all. What we want to do is have that metabolic flexibility, that ability to adapt back and forth, burning fat for fuel and then burning carbohydrates for fuel, or sugar. And when I say sugar, I don't mean like a candy bar. I mean your carbohydrates, like your breads, your pastas, even your fruit, your seasonal fruit that's going to raise your blood sugar. And so it's not about staying on the ketogenic diet for the rest of your life. It's really about creating metabolic flexibility and changing the fuel that your brain uses, all of your cells use, to create energy. So we talked about toxins, nutrients. Then the next one is structure. So structurally, we need to make sure that you can get blood into your brain, oxygen into your brain, and blood and oxygen and toxins, or CO2, excuse me, all of the waste products out of your brain. So if your head is way forward of your shoulders, you're going to pinch those arteries going up into your brain through the cervical vertebrae. And if you don't sleep well at night, you are not going to get that lymphatic flow out of your brain. If you have sleep apnea, you are not going to get enough oxygen into your blood to feed your brain at night. And you are basically going to end up with mild brain damage every night, which if you are struggling with dementia or cognitive decline or fatigue, this is an absolute not okay, right? Like we have to treat aggressively and again, as early on as possible. We don't want that sleep apnea accumulating, creating sleep deprivation. We know that sleep deprivation is associated with Alzheimer's risk. So we have to get on top of that. The other thing is dental work. Are there issues in your mouth? Gut health. Health starts in the gut. Gut health is so important. It's our second brain, and your gut starts in your mouth. So we've got to start with making sure you have really good oral structure, and so that that airway stays open at night. And then also like traumatic brain injuries. If you get hit over the head with a baseball bat, that is going to cause inflammation. That is going to cause issues. We see this certainly with professional athletes. We see this with combat veterans, and women are affected more than men by dementia. And there hasn't been a lot of research or attention on this as of yet, but I'm really hoping that the research goes in the direction of studying what's happening to women who are victims of domestic abuse and violence, especially. So my hope, although it's hard to talk about, I really hope that there's more that goes into that, because women are affected so much more, and there's a lack of research in that space. So structurally, from the macro structure, are we getting blood flow? Are we getting nerve conduction? Is there inflammation in the brain? Is there ischemia? Have there been transient ischemic events or TIAs, types of strokes? Has there been a stroke? Are you getting airway? Is airway flowing? Are there sinus issues that maybe are creating inflammation? And this goes back to, this will lead into a conversation about infections. But right now, just structurally, this macro structure going up to the brain, blood flow, really important. The other piece of structure to talk about is genetics. So we talked a little bit about ApoE4 genetics. There are lots of other single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs that we would call them, small changes in just one allele here or there that can make big differences in how we detoxify, how we create neurotransmitters, and lots of things that can affect our risk for dementia. So it's not just ApoE, but there's lots of genetics, and there are new tests that are available to see kind of where your genetic predisposition is. This is our molecular structure that can either be protective. So if you have an ApoE2, then you're actually protected compared to the rest of the population. If you have 4 or 2 copies of the 4s, then you have higher risk, unfortunately. That doesn't mean this is a guarantee that you get dementia. What it means is that you might have to work harder than your spouse or your neighbor or somebody else who has lower genetic risk.
Right. I wanted to point that out, because people say to me, well, it's in my family, but it may not be it may be in the genetics, but that doesn't mean it's in you, that you are going to develop it, because a lot of people have the ApoE4 genetic tweak, but they don't get Alzheimer's. And there are a lot of people who get Alzheimer's and don't have it. I think that's really important for people to understand.
Really important for people to understand. And so with ApoE4 status, the highest risk with ApoE4, you have a 50% chance of developing dementia in your lifetime. Now, that means you have a 50% chance of not. And how do we increase that 50% to 75 or 80%? It's through the diet and lifestyle changes. And the earlier we do that, the better. Another point to make here around structure is this amyloid plaque hypothesis, that amyloid plaque has been, if you're not studying amyloid, you're not studying Alzheimer's, has been like the refrain, especially from the research community. And what we found is that that's not exactly right. In fact, that's pretty far from right. And that's part of why, despite throwing decades of researchers' time, super smart people's time, and literally billions upon billions of dollars of taxpayer money and private investment from pharmaceutical companies, despite throwing billions and billions of dollars and so much effort and time at this, we've ended up in a dead end when it comes to just reducing beta amyloid plaques or tau proteins. What happens is that we failed with that, with identifying beta amyloid plaques as the problem. We failed to say, well, why were they created in the first place?
Exactly. Yeah, they're a response. They're like from what I understand from what Dr. Bredesen says, they are an immune response, basically.
Right. And when we look at the statistics, if you take people, no matter what age, from newborns to everyone on the planet, only 1% of the planet, or it might be even less, has amyloid, it does not have amyloid plaque in their brain, right? Everybody's got a little bit, essentially. And the other thing is that if you base your diagnostic criteria on beta amyloid plaque in the brain, the amounts of plaque in the brain, then 30% of people over 65 have enough amyloid plaque in the brain to be diagnosed with dementia, regardless of their cognitive status. So they might have perfect cognition, but have some plaque formation, and they could end up with a diagnosis. It's a little backwards, right? So what we care about, the reason that we're here, is to talk about people's cognition and ability to engage with their families, with their friends, in their communities. That's what's important to us, is that quality of life, what you're doing in your 70s, 80s, 90s, after you're a centenarian. It's so exciting what's possible. So we've talked about toxins, we've talked about nutrients, we talked about structure. Stress is the next thing to consider. So you're nodding. And you've been a caregiver.
Yes, and my sister has really, really suffered. She bore the brunt of it because I was 5,000 kilometers away. But yeah, stress. And I hear that from people every day, caregivers every day. Lily, I was just on the phone literally a few minutes before we started this with a lady who's just beside herself. She just doesn't know what to do anymore. And I said to her, the first thing you have to do as a caregiver is care for yourself.
I'm so happy to hear you saying that, because I think the people in caregiving roles, they tend to be a little bit of martyrs, right? They want to care, and their programming is to take care of everyone else before themselves. And yet we see over and over again, the science supports that if you do that, you actually put the person you're caring for at risk. You are not as good at your job. And so it's not selfish, it's actually selfless to schedule that massage, to take a day for yourself, hire someone else, get your siblings more involved, find the financial resources, or reach out to, the senior center or whatever resources are available to you, and get that support so that you get a break.
And also follow the protocols that you're just talking about. Exercise, feed yourself well, because they don't. So many caregivers do not look after their own diet. They're looking after their loved ones, but they're not looking after their diet. They're not getting out and exercising. They're not going out and meeting with other people that they can have a regular conversation with and have some fun, because those are important parts of being a person, and especially as a caregiver.
They're critical, foundational parts of being a healthy, balanced human. And sleep, often people who are caregiving, if especially the person they're caring for has sleep disturbances or sleep changes, they sacrifice their sleep. And we know that that puts everyone at risk, right? So caregivers are at 2 times the risk of developing dementia that those who are not caregivers are. So they're at risk of getting the same diagnosis, right? You don't want to be that person that now needs, it's like a doctor ending up as the patient, right? You don't want to be that person that now needs care. And so we have to put your well-being first. And then people who suffer with PTSD have 2.5 times the risk of developing dementia. People who struggle with depression. And so managing stressors, it becomes critically important. And having a daily routine of meditation, prayer, journaling, self-compassion, we know is associated with a more functional coping strategy. This is hard. This is very challenging to support someone with dementia. And so acknowledging that, and then creating infrastructure around you so that you are cared for as well, is so important. And then also for the person you're caring for, communication strategies that keep their stress low, right? Finding compassion, acknowledging, forgiving, acknowledging I'm sorry, taking responsibility, being true to your word, creating an environment and a communication pattern that doesn't escalate agitation, but that aims to neutralize it. At Marama, it's such a luxury, because our staff and everyone there, we don't have decades of past history. So we don't take it all personally. We know that it's their disease process. So when someone says, no, I won't do that, we don't attach it to something that some argument from 20 years ago. Whereas when you're caring for a loved one, there's a lot of emotion comes up, all that family baggage, right? We've all got it. And so finding ways, again, to create coping strategies, whether it's through I really love the Gupta program, working with a coach, self-compassion practices, you're doing your own personal work, whether that's with a therapist, whatever that means for you, to help you manage those stressors. There's also huge financial stressors, physical stressors, other relationships that can be, strained, of course. And sometimes, just having a home can create security for people. And when we're going through these life transitions, dementia maybe is worsening, sometimes it's appropriate for someone to move, and just that move can be so stressful.
Oh my goodness, my mom had the worst time when we moved her. Oh yeah, yeah. She wandered and I want to go home. I want to go home. It was just heartbreaking.
It's so challenging. And sometimes it feels impossible to balance the interests, right? Like she needs to be safe. And so maybe home isn't safe. Maybe there's too many stairs. Maybe there's not a way to allow her to be outside without the risk of a flight risk. There are so many things that come up. And so, with stress, I do just want to mention like hormones, right? So hormones become part of this. If you are hormone deplete, that becomes a stressor. If you don't have enough cortisol, because you've been under so much stress that you're burnt out, that becomes another stressor on the body. So we need balanced signaling. And that signaling, progesterone is a GABA agonist. So that reduces our experience of stress, because GABA is a relaxing neurotransmitter. It's that 5 o'clock Friday feeling, right? This is happy hour. This is like, okay, nothing's as big of a deal feeling. I can get to sleep. I can let go. So hormonal replacement, I kind of put that in the stress category. It's also kind of like a nutrient, but that hormonal replacement as we age can be very, very helpful in healing and send those signals to the brain to create new memories, create new neurons. This is right when we have the highest hormones in our life, like in our early 20s, late teens. This is when it's so easy to do skill building, so easy to learn. This is why we're in school in those years. So the hormonal component is important. I don't want to miss that. The last one is infections. So I highlight 4 particular infections that tend to create the most inflammation, so signal that beta amyloid plaque production. I don't want anybody to get the idea that I'm suggesting beta amyloid plaques have nothing to do with dementia. They certainly do. There's a relationship there. ApoE4 status, it does increase your risk of developing more plaques. It basically signals to your brain to create more inflammation faster with less of a trigger, so your threshold is lower, to create more amyloid plaque production. When you have lots of amyloid plaques and tau proteins, it's essentially like a scar tissue in your brain. And it does have, there is a correlation and a connection between those things. But it's not the only thing, right? So when you have P. gingivalis, so gum gingivitis, gum disease, oral infections, part of it is just the geography. They're so close. And those infections can then, when you get dental work done, when you get a cleaning, if you're having bleeding of your gums with flossing or brushing, you can introduce these little critters into the blood, and then that can go into your brain. It also puts you at cardiovascular risk, vascular spasm risk. And so critically important for both cardiovascular risk and brain dementia risk to make sure that your oral health is taken care of. There aren't infections. Some of those infections can be insidious. They can be in root canals, in places where you don't realize it. You don't necessarily have a toothache, but there's still a stealth infection in there. So I recommend seeing a biological dentist, again, for both the structural component of keeping the airway open, and then also the infectious component and the toxicity component of potential mercury in the amalgams. So P. gingivalis is one infection to consider. Lyme, the Lyme spirochetes, neurosyphilis is a very similar spirochete. Lyme or neuro-Lyme can cause similar symptoms to dementia. And so there can be overlap. And of course, these things aren't mutually exclusive. You can have high stress. You can have a poor diet and insulin insensitivity. You can have high levels of toxins. and you can have Borrelia. And so we need to address all of them to get the brain optimized. But Borrelia or Lyme can affect the neurological system and is found in those on pathology after autopsy. You can find P. gingivalis, Borrelia, herpes. So herpes simplex 1 and 2, this is oral herpes, genital herpes. If you get recurring outbreaks, my recommendation with the data that we are aware of, some of this comes out of Taiwan, big epidemiological studies where they can see through their nationwide electronic health record that those who were treated aggressively for herpes, when they got recurrent outbreaks, they had less of risk of developing dementia than those who didn't regularly treat with antivirals. As you mentioned, I'm a naturopathic doctor. I'm not a big drug pusher, but when I have a patient who's at risk for dementia, whether genetically and looking to prevent, or they're starting to notice symptoms, if they get recurrent herpes outbreaks, I am treating aggressively with antivirals. And we can use herbal antivirals. We can use things like a little lithium, melissa, St. John's wort. We can use, of course, lysine, the amino acid. You can use some dietary strategies. So there are things we can do from a natural perspective, but I'm pulling out all the stops if somebody has risk for dementia and gets regular herpes outbreaks.
That's good to know, because a lot of people do, and you notice it when they're under stress.
Yes, of course, right? Some people, it's the stress of going to the dentist. Other people, it's like getting a cold or flu, and afterwards they always get a cold sore. Or for some people, it's going through divorce or a move, or it's something bigger psychosocially. But if you are prone to those, then it's important to treat them if you're at risk for dementia.
Excellent advice. Thank you. I'm sure there will be a lot of people interested in that.
And I want to point out that, like, so if we say that herpes is very, very, very common. So if we say that there's basically 4 types of people. So if you take the entire world population, 100% of people on the planet, like 5 to 10% will never be exposed to herpes. Maybe they're nuns, they've never shared a soda can or a water bottle with anybody, and they're never exposed to herpes. The vast majority of us have been exposed to herpes and will show up positive on testing. So testing for herpes is sorely inadequate, right? So about 30%, so if you say there's 90% of people left over, 30% of those people will never have an outbreak, but they will test positive on serology. So they don't have herpes. Like we don't have to, they've been exposed, but they don't have an issue with herpes. There's another 30% of people that will be exposed and have 1 outbreak ever, just once, and they won't get those recurrent outbreaks. Who I'm talking about is that unlucky 30% of people where this is their Achilles heel. They get herpes every time they travel, every time there's some small stressor, or maybe a big stressor, but they're in that category of recurrent herpetic outbreaks. And that's who I'm talking to, though. That's who we want to treat. We want to be treating this aggressively. Do not get on a bunch of Valtrex just because your serology is positive, right? They're not the same thing. And then the last infection we've all heard enough about is COVID. And many of you maybe who are listening can relate to this. If you've had COVID and then notice that you have brain fog after, you don't have the cognitive capacity that you did before. And the reason I put infections last is because many of these are opportunistic, that if you get rid of the toxins, if you get your nourishment, if you exercise regularly, your structure is good, you're sleeping, those foundations are taken care of, you're managing your stressors, well, then your immune system works a lot better. You're not a great host for all of these awful pathogens. And so with COVID, it's this phenomenal example of that, right? That when you have a host who is not very welcoming to the COVID guest, then people have no symptoms at all, or it's very, very mild, like a minor flu. Whereas if you have someone who has glycotoxicity, they're obese, they're under a lot of stress, they're not sleeping well, their immune system is downregulated, not robust, they can, in some awful cases, succumb to the disease and die or have very severe disease.
Yeah, and this COVID brain, I do want to address that while I've got you here, because I'm actually treating a young boy here. He's 11, who has had COVID twice, and he has COVID brain in a serious way, like suicide ideation. He's having violent thoughts, and this child is not violent by any stretch of the imagination, and he can't think properly. He even says, "I don't feel like me." So that's an infection that has come to this child and attacked his brain in a major way. So I'm anxious to hear your take on what to do about that.
Yeah, for better or worse, and there's things that NAD plus is a nutrient that I've seen be helpful for some cases of long haul COVID, but really, it's the same conversation. It's right. If we have complex chronic diseases, and this is where unfortunately conventional medicine doesn't help much, but the conversation for diabetes is the same. The conversation for heart disease is the same, and there's small things that we want to do a little bit differently. And there's conventional medications that we can consider in different cases. However, generally what we're talking about, it's the same thing. It's getting those health foundations in place, getting the nourishment, getting the toxins out, getting restful sleep. All of these things are so foundational to optimal cell function, which is the foundation of health, right? So when every cell is working better, is more optimized, every organ works better, and then our bodies work better.
So even for something like this, it's the same protocol. Just feed properly, get good nutrients, get fresh air, lower stress, all of those things. Yeah, and you and I talked about music and sound for the summit. And what I'm doing with this child is also putting him on the vibroacoustic bed so that he gets to feel very relaxed and those sound waves go through him. Because, yeah, it's just one of the tools that we use.
I'm so grateful that you brought that up, because there is this very long list of things that we can employ. And I think it can sometimes, we go from thinking there's nothing we can do for dementia to being overwhelmed by how much there is we can do for dementia. And, the acoustic, the vibrations, the music, we are electrical beings. We are biochemical beings, which is most of what I've been talking about. And yet we can't ignore the fact that we are electrical beings as well, right? Every cell has some polarity. Every atom, every molecule has electrical polarity, and our heart only beats because of electricity, right? And so the electromagnetic frequencies and that potential toxin, music and vibration and that potential healing benefit, all of these things are extremely valuable and worth considering, and we certainly couldn't cover them all in 45 minutes.
And we're almost at our 45 minutes. So what I would like to do before we go is once again invite our listeners and viewers to the 2022 Reverse Alzheimer's Summit. I am so excited to be a part of this. Heather does an amazing job interviewing people. I watched it myself last year, all of them. It was so wonderful. And I found a few guests for this show because of last year's, so I'm sure I'll tap into them again next year. And so folks, Heather, how can people get involved?
Yeah, so the Reverse Alzheimer's Summit, if you Google my name and Reverse Alzheimer's Summit, it will certainly come up. It's a free event and it goes live on June 14th. So make sure you sign up so that you are notified when those events go live, when the speakers go live. And then if you have further questions, you can find us at Solcere, SOLCERE.com, which is my clinic. And then Marama Experience, MARAMA experience.com. If you're interested in becoming a resident there, you can apply or reach out to Carrie, who's our operations director over there, who does a phenomenal job helping people get the resources they need. We have health coaching offerings, and you do as well. And then we have a Marama at Home course. So if you can't make it to Southern California, there's now a course available to help you implement as much of the Bredesen protocol at home as possible.
Oh, that's wonderful. I didn't realize you had an at home. That's perfect. I will make sure all of those links are in, and I'll put a link to the summit as well in the show notes, so everybody will be able to tap in. Dr. Heather Sandison, this has been such a pleasure, and I've learned so much, and I just very much appreciate you.
Kate, it's such a privilege. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for this week's episode of Brain Health Matters. I hope you're feeling as encouraged as I am. We can make a difference. Please join us for our guest next week, Dr. Felice Gersh, who will be helping us understand why it is that women are 3 times as likely as men to develop dementia.